Hi, everyone,
Hello.
and welcome to the lecture about vibe coding. So we know each other pretty well right now, I would say. I'm an AI educated from Bay Area, California. And today we are going to talk about what is vibe coding, what can you do with vibe coding, best vibe coding tools for founders, best advice on vibe coding, how vibe coding tools are created, and of course, the limitations and risks. So I just want to start again with a question for you. Can you please write in the chat if you have any experience with vibe coding and also if you know what is vibe coding in general? It would be great to know. So what is vibe coding? So it's actually it has like a really funny story to me about how this term was created. It was created by Andrej Karpathy. Also, please write in the chat if you know who it is, because this is a really famous person in AI and ML. So Andrej Karpathy, he worked at Tesla in AI, but also he co-founded OpenAI. Oh, he's from Slovakia. That's great. So basically, how the vibe coding term was created, it was created on X, Twitter. So when Andrej Karpathy just wrote about like, oh, I'm thinking that I have like a new kind of coding which I call vibe coding. So it was created in February this year. And it started to be a really hyped term. And it's funny because last year when I taught a lecture about like coding with LLM in Roboteam, it was there was no like term of vibe coding back then. This is just about like how rapidly the AI thing changes every month, I would say. So what is vibe coding? The exact term is fully give into the vibes, embrace exponentials, and forget that the code even exists. So here it's not about like the coding, it's about get into the vibes and also embrace exponentials. What does it mean, embrace exponentials? That you have the LLMs, that the LLM's growth is not linear, it's exponential. So basically, vibe coding is just embracing about like how this technology is evolving. So in simple terms, traditional coding is like when a software engineer writes the code by themselves. But in case of vibe coding, you just write a prompt to a tool, and then this tool creates the websites or applications per your request. So instead of the exact coding, you just write prompts and play around with the LLMs to create the software different applications. So, and also I asked the ChatGPT to generate images about like the traditional coding and vibe coding looks like. And vibe coding is really also related to a software engineer lying on a beach with a laptop, really like having the vibes instead of like sweating in the office and really stressfully thinking about how the app should look like. Let's talk about what you can do with vibe coding. I think it's pretty clear for all of you, but just to be sure that's clear, first one is rapidly prototype MVPs and ideas. So you can create like websites and applications with that. Second one is build low or no code websites and applications like personal sites or tools. It's also pretty clear. The third one is learn and explore programming interactively. So there are some tools like Cursor, for instance. And if you are interested in learning coding, I think it's the best time because these vibe coding tools that really can show you like how all these complex applications are created. And the fourth one, accelerate development of specific parts within larger projects. So for instance, my husband, he works at Google and they use Gemini pretty often at their work. So it also can help with larger projects sometimes, but we will talk about this later. Let's talk right now about the best vibe coding tools for founders. I think we talked about a little bit about the Replit that I recommended for you to use for creating websites. But just there are different no code or low code tools that you can use to create some MVPs. I just made a table for that. So I would say that Lovable and Replit are pretty amazing for creating like the prototypes for raising funds later on. So I would just recommend them. And also there are some tools which are moderate to high code tools. And here I would just want to point it out to the Cursor, which is a really great tool, but I would say this is already for people with some experience in coding, where you also can create anything basically with the Cursor. And it's also powered by Claude, the Anthropic's LLM. So please write down if you have any experience with Replit or Lovable or Cursor, and please write down what exactly did you use. How vibe coding looks like. So I think it's pretty clear for you. I hope you can see the page that I'm screen sharing right now. It should be the Lovable website. If not, please write it down in the chat. So as you know, on the left, you have like the prompts that you can write, and then on the right, you have the website, how it would look like. It's pretty simple. And also, I just want to point it out that here you also can access the codes of this website. You can go to the top bar here, and also you can like see how this vibe coding tool generated like all these websites, like the core codes of this. So this is just for some of you who did not have experience with the Lovable or Replit. So right now, let's talk about the advice in terms of how to use the vibe coding, and I think it's pretty important. The zero advice, because the programming starts from zero, is that create the application plan with an LLM or GPT. And here I would say that I do not often use this advice because I do have some experience, lots of experience with creating websites. So I already have in my mind about like how this website should look like, what actions you should have, what kind of pages you should have. But if you don't have much experience with websites creation, it might be a good idea for you to brainstorm with GPT, and you can just write GPT, okay, I want to build this kind of a website. Think about like how the pages should look like, what kind of buttons I should have, and also write that the GPT should write a prompt that you are going to use in a vibe coding tool. So in that case, the prompt that you are going to use, like on Lovable, for instance, is going to be much better, much more concise, much more comprehensive. And in that way, your result might be much better if you would, instead of like writing it by yourself. The first advice is start small, build MVP, then add features step by step. So it's really important that you should really start small and think about like what is the main pain point of your customer that you should solve. And I would just really suggest, and not only B, but also like YC and Andrei Karpathy, that you should really start with like a small prototype at first, and then add features step by step. The second advice is define the vision and logic clearly. So here is about, again, you should give as much context to the LLM or vibe coding tool as you can. So then you would have better results. It's same as with GPT. It's better for you to write a task with really like as much details as you can. So this is the overall advice here. The third one is give as much detail like mockups, data, screenshot, references as possible. So here I want to talk about like references. So this is what I use a lot. I think that when it comes about like design or how the website should look like, I would not spend my time reinventing of how the website should look like. So what I do usually, like in this example, I basically said, okay, just use the same structure as the Replit AI, or you can say any website which is really successful, like OpenAI or any other, like your competitors, for instance. And you just can say, okay, just use that website, have the same landing page, but for your product. And also use the same fonts, but just change the colors to my project. So here, in that way, it's going to just use like the, for instance, Replit AI's design, make it the same way, and you would have like a good looking product already. And here I also want to give some insight from what I have from my friends who are at Y Combinator right now. So what they did, they just basically made the same design as their biggest competitors, and they just showed that they can build the prototype without any investment. So they were not making a new design for the same problem. They just made the same design as their competitor, but they just showed that without any investments that the competitor had, they just could build the same product basically. And this is how I guess they were also selected to the YC. So it's pretty cool. Do not spend too much time like about how it should look like. I think just give references, and vibe coding tools are really great with it. The fourth advice is really important, that you should not avoid one-shot requests like build the whole app. So it's better, again, do it step by step instead of like saying, okay, you should create a Facebook, for instance, where you have like add in friends and so on and so forth. Start from small and then add to this, so it's working better with the vibe coding tools. The fifth advice here, don't describe the codes, describe the products or experience you want to create. And here it's more an advice for software developers rather than no-code founders, because instead of like writing, oh, you need to create a website with HTML here, the font size should be this, you should put this link here, you can just explain like what products should look like, and vibe coding tools, they work pretty great with this. And the sixth advice here is, which is also pretty good to know, is that you should use version control so you can roll back easily. I know some of you use Lovable, and here I just want to show you how this version control looks like. So here, when you create like some adjustments to your code, you also have like this button here to restore. So basically you can restore it to the previous version. So I think it's really great to use. So for instance, if something goes wrong, I would rather go back and then try to make it again, but with a better prompt, rather than trying to fix what this model did. So just overall advice, use this version control, and also save your project. It might be not the case here for Lovable, but there are some platforms where it's not saved automatically. I had this problem some weeks ago. Yeah, that was pretty sad. So the seventh advice is use other LLMs for non-code tasks and error solving to accelerate the progress. So how it usually look like? So for instance, with Cursor, it works really great that I would use like Cursor, for instance, and also GPT. So when there is an error on my website, it can be also on Lovable. What you can do, you can just copy paste all the code that you have here, or you can make screenshots and send it to the GPT. And say like, okay, I have this error, help me to fix it in the easiest way possible, and make it step by step. So it's really great to use like multiple platforms like GPT and something and the vibe coding tool. So GPT can just, instead of overwhelming the vibe coding tool like Cursor or Lovable with your questions, you can ask the questions in the GPT. So then your prompts are cleaner in the vibe coding, and then it will just work better in the end. I will explain later on why. So let's go further. These were the advice about vibe coding, and now how vibe coding tools are created. And this information is a bit more technical than the rest of the lecture, but it just would give you an idea about like the limitations that can come up with these vibe coding tools. So going back to the first lecture that we had about introduction to AI, we had this diagram about like how the LLMs are created. So you remember that basically you have this neural network, huge LLM, and you have like the chunk of internet. Basically, you copy the whole internet and put it to the LLM. So LLM is trained on this chunk of the internet. So just for you to understand, for instance, how the Replit platform works, Replit, it has own small LLM, but which is still large with like lots of parameters and so on. And what they do, that instead of having like the chunk of internet deployed into the LLM, it has like, let's say, some coding database, which is fed to the LLM, and then it's trained there. So here we have like GitHub. I guess if you were ever interested in software engineering, GitHub is basically open source for coding. So it's a really large data sets of different codes. Stack Overflow, it's a website where different questions about coding are asked and solved. And also there is like different also additional coding databases. So basically, instead of having like the chunk of internet into GPT, for instance, you would have like some coding database fed to the LLM. So this is how the Replit, for instance, LLM was created. Another thing from the first lecture as well, if you remember, I hope you remember, is about the fine tuning. So you remember that we had some stuff, some LLMs like Claude or GPT. So here I just want to show you that we talked about the Replit, but now about Lovable or Cursor. So this is how Lovable and Cursor are created. So basically, they are working on external LLMs. They don't have own LLMs. So Cursor, for instance, is heavily working on Claude and Lovable on like multiple LLMs. Actually, Cursor also uses multiple LLMs, but Cursor is Anthropic's company still. So basically, they have this multiple LLMs like Claude, GPT, Gemini, and then they do the fine tuning. So again, what is fine tuning? Fine tuning is like when you have like a question or input to your LLM, you have a result, but then you also add additional data, and in this case is going to be additional coding data, and then again this you train this Claude and GPT on this additional data, and then you have an output of the code, and then this output is again checked like with this additional data if it's correct or not. So I just summarized these three the most popular platforms that basically Replit is like a hybrid of own LLM, but also other LLMs. Lovable and Cursor are other LLMs, external LLMs, and then they are fine-tuned. All of them are actually fine-tuned, but here I just want to show you that what is underneath this vibe coding tool. So it's basically the same LLMs, own or external, and also they are fine-tuned with the additional like coding data. So, but the idea is pretty the same, that these are LLMs which are fine-tuned or pre-trained with additional coding data. So I hope this information is going to be beneficial for you in terms of when we are going to talk about the limitations and risks. Because again, this is already from the previous lecture, again, about how the LLMs work, that LLMs, they just generate the text. I hope you remember this. So how it works again with the GPT, you ask a question and then GPT just generates the next word. Or in the LLM terms, it's a token, basically. So GPT just generates the next token. So how it works with the coding LLMs and also with this vibe coding tools, or when you ask GPT to write a code, it works exactly the same. So it's not GPT LLMs, they do not create the whole code, which is like engineers think about the code, which is like it should have this kind of an architecture and so on and so forth. What LLMs do when they create the code, they just generate the next basically word in the code. So you can imagine that, again, this comes about the problem about hallucinations of the LLMs, and we have the same problem with vibe coding tools or coding LLMs, that it would have still hallucinations when you go above some complexity level. So again, as I hope you remember this example with Keanu Reeves, that Keanu Reeves' father, LLM knows, but LLM doesn't know who is the son of the father of Keanu Reeves. So here is with coding, it's pretty the same. It doesn't have like a logic or reasoning as we humans do. It just generates next token, next letter, next word. But of course, with this heavy fine tuning and so on, they still can show decent results, but there are some limitations. So let's talk about the limitations. And of course, the first one is about the reasoning is limited. Reasoning is basically about like thinking step by step about like how to solve a problem. So reasoning is limited in LLMs and it produces the hallucinations. So this is the first problem of these vibe coding tools. So keep it in mind. And then the second one is that 0 to 1 speed is phenomenal for prototypes, but scaling from 1 to n to $1 billion valuation or users requires hardcore systems engineering. So here is about if you want to build a prototype that is going to be for some users and that you want just to show your idea and raise money, vibe coding is great for that because you can really make prototypes really quickly and for a low cost. But when it comes about scaling, if later on after raising investments, you want to get additional, like you want to have thousands users and you would have like this high load on your websites or applications. In that case, of course, you would need to have like software engineers and vibe coding is not going to be enough there. And the third limitation is maintainability and code understanding. Because when you play with the vibe coding, it creates like here you can see it creates lots of like files and different code here. And when you work on this project for a long time, it would be already difficult. Like if you would have some like software engineering engineering background, it would be hard to even understand like what is going on here after a while. Because again, this vibe coding tools, it is like it's like a magic, but not completely. So if you work on a project like a lot with vibe coding, it becomes more than a prototype. It can really mess up with the code and create like useless files, useless functions, useless code, and so on and so forth. And the fourth advice is very important, as Timofey as well mentioned in the beginning of this lecture. You should think about like security, correctness, and reliability. And of course, if you want to make like a project about like financial systems and so on, be careful with the vibe coding because it really is so better not to create an app which would connect users' credit card to the platform, because like you cannot expect good security from vibe coding websites or applications. And as well, do not collect, I would say like it's better not to collect any sensitive data of users. So even like home address and so on, you should really think about, about that. Vibe coding tool websites or applications that are created, they are really vulnerable in terms of security and are easily hacked. And then the fifth limitation is complex or domain-specific problems. And again, here, when we go back to how these vibe coding tools are created, they are created from the coding bases that exist right now in the world, right? So first of all, the code in GitHub is not great. It's like 90% of the, or even more, of code on GitHub is actually pretty bad. So of course you can imagine that when it comes about like complex tasks, the vibe coding would not be enough for that. And also when it comes about like domain specific problems. So for instance, in my case, my second job is about like quantum computing. There is no enough of data of quantum computing code. So LLMs are not that great with creating quantum computing code. So when it comes about like something complex or something specific, which you can imagine that there is not much code in the world that these vibe coding tools were trained on. So in that case, there would be a big limitation for this project. So I would just say, really, when it comes about vibe coding, keep it simple, create an MVP prototype, make it simple, solve one problem. Do not think about creating, again, like a Facebook or Instagram, something like this. It should be simple. The sixth limitation is no coding skills, more time spent on vibe coding, more coding skills, less time, faster results. So of course, this is about like if we are not going to have any software engineers in the future. So the current take is that the LLMs might replace the junior software engineering roles, but when it comes about like more sophisticated tasks, LLMs are still not there. This comes as well about like vibe coding. Vibe coding is a great additional thing that software engineers can do, so they can build something quickly. But if a person doesn't have any software engineering experience, they still can build projects with that, but you would expect that you would need more time to make something which works. Yeah, so here is about that. If you have no coding skills, that's fine. You might just need more time to create something which is working. But also here I had some good thought about this, but I forgot about it. Okay, I will come back to this later if I remember. Yeah. The seventh is limitation. Debugging is a human task still. So when it comes, your project is already pretty like heavy, and vibe coding tools, for instance, cannot solve some certain tasks. What you can do, you can just copy paste the error, screenshot all the code you have, and make it in a separate LLM. So yeah, the vibe coding tools might be not enough just to solve the vibe coding, just to solve the errors. And the eighth limitation, the last but not least, is that context window is still a problem. So I think we talked about the context window before. So what is context window is basically short memory of an LLM. So for instance, when you have ChatGPT, you talk with the GPT, and then anything you write there and anything that GPT replies to you, it is stored in the context, in the short memory. But context window has limitations. So for instance, it's like 200,000 words. So each model like Claude, GPT, Gemini, they have different context window limitations. So for instance, like GPT has a context window of 200,000 words. So when your conversation is more than that, it would not remember the whole conversation. It would just remember some chunks of it. So again, just for you who forgot about what is context window. So when the conversation starts to be too large, GPT would not remember some parts of it because it's above the context window. So why it's important about vibe coding? So here it's pretty the same. You can imagine that here context window is not like only your conversation, but also the whole code, which is here. And all of it is stored in the in this short memory. So when it is more than, let's say, 200,000 tokens, then it's going to forget some files, forget some important things that you asked, and so on. So then it's going to create something which is not working. So here, when we know about this limitation, I think a good advice here would be that when you start to play around with Lovable or like Replit, you should, or even Cursor, you should really think ahead before writing any prompts to it. So, so for instance, when you ask to edit something, make it really specific, so then it can do it in one shot, like correctly. And also for like better context window, you can also restore the previous version. So for instance, you ask like, I don't like this button, put it on the right and blah, blah, blah. And then somehow the Lovable doesn't do it correctly. I would just go back to the previous version and rewrite the prompt so then the result is satisfying for you. And then, so I would just really keep the prompts that you write really clean. So in that case, it might be better for your like context window, and you're not going to overwhelm with different prompts here. And as well, so basically here, advice is really think well before writing a prompt to the like Lovable, Replit, or Cursor. And also, if it comes really bad and then you have like lots of files and it just creates some like bad stuff here, one advice might be not the best one, but what you can do is you can duplicate this project and then add prompts there again. Because if you duplicate this project and start again with your website, this whole prompt memory is going to be erased. So you would have like more memory for your prompts. Yeah, but yeah, best advice here, really think well before like writing prompts to Lovable and so on, because context window is still a problem. LLMs do not like when there is like lots of text there. So keep it concise and detailed, but efficient as well. So the conclusion here is, as Timofey said as well in the beginning, but it's really important to know that vibe coding is great for rapid prototyping, but it's not enough for scaling production level systems. So when you build an MVP, vibe coding is great, but keep it clean. Think about it. It's really well before like prompting. And also when you raise money already and you want to scale your projects to like thousands of users, then you would need like a software engineer in your team. Thank you so much.